A shadow, a cipher, a name that terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s. The Zodiac Killer is more than a criminal. He's an enigma, a man who played with the fears of the public, a puppet master hiding behind cryptic symbols and taunting letters. To this day, the Zodiac Killer remains one of the most haunting figures in criminal history, his identity as elusive as his motives. Join us on Motive, Mystery, and Murder as we journey back to the terrifying nights that birthed a legend and a monster. It all started on December 20th, 1968, just before Christmas. Young couple Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, high school sweethearts, parked on a rural road for what they thought would be a peaceful evening. They were interrupted by an unknown figure who, without warning, shot them both. The sheriff's department was stumped. The scene was a silent, eerie canvas of tragedy. No witnesses, no clear motive. And then, 6 months later, another couple, Darlene Farron and Michael Mageau, were targeted in Vallejo. The gunman struck in a secluded area, shooting both without hesitation. Miraculously, Michael survived, and he recounted the attack with chilling detail, describing a stocky figure in dark clothes, and yet no one could predict what would happen next. Months later, Northern California's newspapers received their first message from the killer. In an unprecedented move, he demanded his letters be printed on the front pages of the San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Examiner, and Vallejo Times-Herald, or else he'd continue his spree. The letters were unusual, a haunting blend of taunts, symbols, and strange phrases. The killer had named himself, "This is the Zodiac speaking," he wrote, a name that sent chills down every reader's spine. One of the most famous elements of the Zodiac's letters was his first cipher, a bizarre, intricate pattern of symbols and letters he claimed would reveal his identity. Decoded by amateur codebreakers Donald and Betty Harden, the cipher revealed the Zodiac's chilling words, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." This was no ordinary criminal. This was someone who enjoyed the terror, who fed off the fear, who saw himself as a dark force in society. The murders. In September 1969, the Zodiac struck again, this time in broad daylight. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking by Lake Berryessa when a man approached wearing an executioner-style hood, emblazoned with his iconic crosshair symbol. He tied the couple up and, with horrific calm, attacked them. In a rare move, he called the police to report his own crime, laughing and boasting about his act. Later, he left his mark on the door of the victim's car, the crosshair symbol, and a chilling tally of his murders. The Zodiac was now marking his crimes, his signature as infamous as his name. His cruelty was terrifying, but his control was even more disturbing. Every attack seemed calculated, every murder a message. The Zodiac's letters continued, each more disturbing than the last. The police were baffled, the public terrified, and the media obsessed. For months, his letters and ciphers made headlines, sparking fear and speculation. Some believed he was a genius, others saw him as pure evil. With each letter, the Zodiac seemed to revel in his role as the villain, feeding off the nation's fascination with his twisted puzzle. Amateur detectives, newspaper editors, and cryptologists joined the hunt, decoding and analyzing every word, every symbol. But for all their efforts, the Zodiac's identity remained shrouded. His letters often included references to literature, military terminology, and even celestial themes. FBI profiler John Douglas, who worked on the case, believed the Zodiac was driven by a deep desire for power and control. He thrived on manipulation, crafting his public persona carefully. Unlike other killers, he didn't have a clear profile for victims. He was indifferent, making him unpredictable and even more frightening. The Zodiac also enjoyed leaving puzzles, metaphors, literary references, symbols, intended to confuse and intrigue. The Zodiac Killer was not just a murderer, he was a self-made myth. The Zodiac Killer's impact on American culture cannot be understated. He haunted Northern California at a time when serial killers were becoming a terrifying part of the national consciousness. The Zodiac was America's real-life boogeyman, a figure as frightening as any horror film villain, but with a twisted intellect and a public presence that made him even more unnerving. People were captivated and horrified, watching each new letter, each coded message, hoping for a clue, an answer. He became a symbol of the unknown, His legend inspired books, movies, documentaries, and endless theories. Decades later, the Zodiac still looms large as the ultimate unsolved case. Over the years, many suspects have emerged, each with tantalizing details, but none conclusive enough for an arrest. Arthur Lee Allen, one of the most compelling suspects, had a troubled past and was linked to the case by certain circumstantial evidence. Investigators believed they were close to an answer with Allen, but he died before definitive proof could be found. Another theory points to Rick Marshall, an eccentric film projectionist whose handwriting bore some similarities to Zodiac's letters. And then there's Lawrence Kane, a man with a history of violence and mental instability who was known to frequent the areas where some murders took place. The Zodiac remains, in every way, a mystery. Recent attempts to crack the case have included DNA testing, analysis of new suspects, and high-tech decoding of his letters. Yet the Zodiac's identity remains buried, perhaps forever. More than 50 years later, the Zodiac killer's shadow still hangs over the world of true crime. His ciphers, his letters, his murders, they've created a legacy that endures. The Zodiac is a dark figure in the world of unsolved mysteries, a haunting reminder that sometimes the worst evils can remain faceless, nameless, and hidden. He is not just a criminal, he is an unsolved riddle, a myth that blurs the line between fact and fear. Do you think we'll ever learn the truth? Was the Zodiac a twisted genius or simply a man who got away with murder? Share your theories with us below, and don't forget to join us next time on Motive, Mystery, and Murder. Until then, remember, some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Stay curious and stay safe.